Welcome back to another episode of Journey of the Wounded Masculine, where we discuss our journeys as men and coming from a humble place and discovering ourselves and the journey of that, the challenges, the wisdom, all the things that we want to share with you to help you on your path.
Absolutely.
My name is Brandon.
And I'm Shane. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Like and subscribe. Help us spread the word.
Yes, please like and subscribe if you are liking what we're doing. That helps us out a ton. Make sure to hit the bell notification to get updates and notifications automatically.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So let's dive in, huh?
We're going to dive in. Today's topic is
Boundaries.
boundaries.
Personal boundaries. Boundaries in relationships. We'll talk about it all.
Yeah. The importance of boundaries, about all the good stuff on boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, so many times in my life, setting boundaries has been really hard, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Until you're really aware of it.
I find it's been a huge hurdle for me in my lifetime.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I was just like a pushover. You know, I didn't know about boundaries.
People pleasing?
People pleasing, yes. I don't know. I think it can be really easy to not set boundaries because, well, we want people's love, right? And we think that if we don't set proper boundaries and kind of do what they want, then we're going to get that love. But that is false. That is not the truth at all.
Why so? What do you mean?
It is because
is that a piece of filling that void that we talked about?
well, yeah, like we were talking about before, that's abandoning the self.
Yeah.
So that's abandoning the self when we don't set boundaries. And so that's not loving ourselves. And so if we're not loving ourselves, we can't receive love from other people. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So the boundaries is an act of love for yourself.
Yes. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want to do the definition?
Uh-huh.
Right. Let's see here.
We got a definition for boundaries.
TheFreeDictionary.com says that something that indicates a border or limit, which makes sense. Typically.
Yeah. Nice, simple, and short.
Geographically, your mind goes there to what a country's border is, and where a fence is, so to speak, where your property is, where it contains your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking more of a personal boundary within your emotional intelligence, right?
Yes.
Like to keep yourself centered, to keep yourself grounded, people taking your energy from you from not setting proper boundaries.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Yeah. I mean, my boundaries were so bad at one point. It kind of reminds me of this story of when I lived in Detroit. I had a roommate that had a brother come stay in with us here and there. And I started to notice kind of weird things. They were like, he would be in the bathroom for a long time. He would come out of the bathroom sweating bullets and all pale and go just sit on the couch for hours. And I was starting to think, like, man, like, what's this guy doing? Is he like doing drugs in there or what? And eventually found a needle in our couch. And this went on for a long time without me setting the boundary.
How were you feeling at the time? Was it?
It was terrible.
Yeah.
Like, here's this guy in my house doing this. Like, I'm not setting boundaries. I was like putting it on his brother to like, hey, you need to set boundaries with this guy.
Right.
He wasn't doing it. And it ended up blowing up one day of, once your boundaries are pushed too far, then it was kind of like a little explosion where I just exploded on the guy and was like, dude, you need to get out of this house. Like, you're doing heroin in our house and it's not welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
And he retaliated against me and like grabbed me and threw me to the ground. This guy was like 6'5", a big guy. And it was a scary experience for me. And the funny thing is it all settled down. My roommate was so triggered by that he ended up moving out weeks afterwards.
Wow.
And then some weeks after that, I hear a knock on my door. And it's this guy. And he's like, "Hey man, I'm just in your neighborhood buying tires. Like, can I use your bathroom?" And there was this piece of me that wanted to help him and like still allow him in my house. But then my higher self, like my intuition came and was like, "No, man, like you don't let vampires in your house.
Right.
Like you just don't let them in. They can't do anything." And so I set a boundary there that day and said, "No, you can't come into my house." You know what's been great?
What's that?
Since that day, I've not had any heroin addicts in my life. And here's another thing I find funny about boundaries is like sometimes in life, there's these like certain problems coming up in our lives, relationship wise or otherwise, and it just like keeps coming up. But once we like stand in who we are and set that boundary with one person,
Sure.
it now creates this energetic boundary to where those things aren't even attracted to you anymore.
It's really true.
It's really been amazing. Just seeing my own growth and my own process and all the different kinds of crap that used to be in my life that's just not here anymore because I set a boundary once and you know,
It's like a trickle effect to multiples.
yeah.
When were you like, I mean, was that you learn how to set an energetic boundary back then? Or is that
I,
just like,
I think I think just like speaking boundaries, like we don't even have to make it energetic. It's not like I did a meditation and set this fantasy boundary up in my mind. It's just like, no, he was at my door and I said no. And then that creates an energetic boundary.
sure.
I think from my own dips in spiritual world, like there's all these ways to like meditate and set boundaries, and it's like none of those things never really worked very well for me. What works well for me is saying no.
True, but how do you say, like, how do you set a nice boundary, a really good boundary for yourself, but yet being tactful in the way that you're doing it? Because maybe it's a loved one that you're trying to set a boundary with. Like, maybe it's a child. Those are the hardest boundaries for me to
Yeah,
set.
yeah.
Or a spouse or someone you're dating or whatever it may be. How do you go about personally setting a boundary that, like we were talking about earlier, sometimes, like I was sharing one that I got triggered with, and then I responded on the offense, like you had called out.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of coming from a loving space, setting a nice boundary. No, I was offended, so when I set that boundary, I came across defensively, and it was taken the wrong way. You know, that has happened to me several times in my life by setting the boundary without being in a loving space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe the best way to do that is when you are triggered to see what boundary needs to be set and then really wait to mention setting it till you're back in the love space.
That's a good point. Yeah, sit with it until you really, I mean, don't act on it right away.
Yeah.
And if your partner needs an answer right away, you just that's another way of setting a boundary. Say, I can't speak about this in a loving way yet. Give me the time to really get there, and then I can come to you and talk to you about it.
Yep.
And if they're really good people, they're going to respect that and give you that space to work on it. But yeah, but I think a lot of times we get fearful. Like, well, is this going to end something, or are they going to think worse of me because of it? Like, if I can retreat and say, honey, I need to go back into myself because I'm triggered a bit, or not even use the word trigger. Trigger is so overused these days anyway. It feels like it doesn't feel right with me, and I need to sit with it until I'm truly in my love space and be able to come to you and talk to you about it.
Yeah.
Because it creates a lot of problems.
It does.
I had a lot of problems in my last relationship with that, honestly. Because I mean, when my last marriage I was with, and I was really going through a lot of difficult times, and I shared a little bit that in the first or second episode. It was well, anyway, when something came to me, and I'm going to use the word again, triggered. I really did get triggered by something that she did, but it wasn't that she did it. It was a familiar space that I had been in from my past, and it brought that up in me and created this. Oh, I need to set a boundary here because the last time this sucked ass, right? And I didn't approach it quite right, where I was coming from that offensive space. And I said, listen, this is my boundary. This is what has to happen. I'm like such an asshole.
It's like, it's my way or the highway.
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't say that, but it's pretty much what I said.
That's what the vibe feels
right.
like.
It was. And it created an argument, which led into more arguments, and it was just a disaster. So I think setting boundaries it's an artwork.
It's an art form for sure of learning how to set boundaries, especially with people you're close to and you love. Like people that you really want still in your life. It's just like, oh, I'm bumping into this thing with this person. And so how can I have a conversation with the person to discuss the boundary?
Right.
Maybe that's another way too. Of instead of saying, I have this boundary, you need to meet it, to say, hey, I'm having this thing come up that's bringing up this boundary for me, like what's coming up for you when I say this, and just have more of a discussion instead of saying coming to them like, this is my boundary.
Right, but when you're in a trauma bond relationship, which I trying to believe that I was, my boundary triggered her.
Oh yeah.
And that we became now arguing about how I offended her, and she wouldn't. She wasn't able to hold that space, in my opinion, but I could be wrong about that too. But it was just like a vicious circle at that point. So here I am setting boundary for myself, feeling good about that, right? Well, I wasn't coming across right quite well. Maybe it was in my tone or, my way or the highway kind of approach. And it triggered her. And then I wasn't conscious enough to hold space in that. And it just created a chaos, and it blew up. So that's the dangers of setting boundaries in not a loving space.
Well, here's the thing. You setting boundaries in that space did show you what that relationship actually was.
True.
Which was not really a relationship in true love.
Yeah, but it showed me more. That it did show me that, but it showed me how I should handle the future. Like, are you going to learn from your mistakes? You were trying to learn how to set really good boundaries, but yet the way you went about it was wrong. And I believe I've learned my lesson because
it's a continual learning, right?
Yeah. So in my new relationship with Kelly, I had something come up where it was hard. It was a very tough boundary that I felt like I needed to talk about, and I was tactful in the way that I said it. But I didn't feel great about it.
You still had the offensive energy there. Like, even though you were tactful on how you talked about it,
right.
Like, it was still coming from that.
I felt like I was coming from, like, a loving space. But what I didn't think about was, this is a person that I love. And I need to be very respectful in the way that I do that, because now I don't know how she's going to feel about it. And give her that opportunity to work through it herself. And not my way or the highway. I did come through that approach, so I have learned. But it still felt like I felt off about it still.
Yeah. So maybe there's just more learning to do. And also, I think a lot of times setting boundaries with people just feels off. Even if you're doing it in a loving way, there is that underlying fear there of like, oh, I'm setting this boundary, I'm doing it in a loving way, but what if they still don't love me? So I think for a lot of us,
that's an insecurity popping up in your boundary.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason we don't set boundaries, is because we're afraid to lose people's love.
True. But then setting that boundary was healthy anyway, because you didn't need it if they didn't really love you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had some exes come back into my life after that relationship failed. And I had to set pretty healthy boundaries.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember they were just flocking to you, and like I was like so proud of you and how well you were just like boom boom. Nope, we're not going there. We're not going there.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I was doing that, I had to honor myself. And for me to honor myself with those boundaries, I mean, they're past relationships for a reason. They didn't work out. It's like taking spoiled milk and putting it back in the refrigerator and then closing the door and then coming back and, hey, is the spoiled milk still good? No, it's still bad. It's not going to ever be the same way it was. So exes, sometimes I know people do get back with their exes sometimes, and it's wonderful, but most of the time it's not. And that's what I heard that a long time ago, and it's always stuck with me. But setting that boundary was a way of respecting myself, and that's when I learned how to love me. And that's just weird. It's taken me so long to understand how to love myself. And I had an experience where I was in my cave time, and a friend, well, I thought was a new acquaintance, and just came over because, I'm in my cave and I'm just not really entertaining many people. Well, anyway, I'm sitting on a chair, she's sitting on the couch, and I set those boundaries. I'm like, I'm not in a sexual space. I just can't be. I'm not there at all. I said, all I want is friendship. Well, I felt the energy change and shift, and she became more aggressive, and I'm like, listen, I told you what my boundaries were. I think it's time to go. And I did that. And I walked her to her vehicle. And I couldn't even give her a hug. I just was like, no, it was way off. And she left, and I never spoke to her again. And I went back into my chair, and I sat right in that same spot, and I bawled. I cried my eyes out because I felt like I loved myself by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I gave myself the permission to say no and to honor who I am, and that my worth was more important than any physical, gratification.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Well, in the end, it wouldn't be gratifying anyways.
No.
Nothing's truly gratifying when you're not following your own intuition.
Yeah. But I cried like a baby. It was awesome. But it was joyful. It wasn't like I cried like I was sad.
No, it was just like a
oh my
joyful,
God,
happy
just
cry.
Really loved you, Shane, and that was awesome. So, I don't know.
Yeah. No is such a big, awesome word.
No is a complete sentence.
No is a complete sentence. This is one thing I've learned in setting boundaries with people. Of just when I was younger, I'd always need to find a reason. No, I can't show up there that day because I have this and that going on. No, and I've learned over time
to justify it.
I don't need to justify.
Yeah.
All I need is just to not want to. And that's it. I don't have to make up excuses. I don't have to do anything except for say, nope. No, I don't want to do that today.
There's nothing wrong with
it. Yeah. I had one woman friend come over some months ago, and she was like, oh, I'd really like to do body work on each other this evening and all that. And I was just like, right away in my body, I'm like, no, no, I don't want to do that tonight.
It didn't feel right.
We can eat a little bit of food and have a conversation, but like I don't feel like that's what I want to do with my evening.
Yeah, you've been a good teacher when it comes to the boundary setting. I've paid attention to some of the ways you set boundaries,
mm-hmm.
and it trickled into my life too. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Just love teaching each other things.
That's the way it works.
That's why we need friends, guys.
Right.
We all need really good friends because we learn so much from each other.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yeah. What?
Iron?
Iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I want to bring up around boundaries is boundaries can also be a very good way for transformation to occur in alchemy. And I actually had this teacher some time back when I was going through some deep sexual healing. And she kind of gave this like metaphorical type way of looking at boundaries and the importance of boundaries. And so it's like, well, what if we want to transform water into steam? Okay. Well, if you were to just take water and throw it on the fire,
just puts it out.
It just puts it out. Nothing happens. It's the energy dead. But now if we take that water and put it in a container or pot that has a certain set of boundaries that contains the water within it and place it over the fire, the alchemical process can occur.
Right.
And charge that water into steam. And I just found that really cool. And when I heard that, it really taught me the importance of boundaries, because I had a negative look on boundaries before. It was kind of like a felt bad for saying no, or I don't even know how to. I don't even know what that negative look looks like now. It's kind of funny.
That's a great analogy, though. I mean, you think about it. I mean,
Uh-huh.
the water and the fire together without any boundaries, any container, are just gonna cancel each other out. You're not gonna get the effect you need or want.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Yeah, yeah. I found it a really amazing. I think the better word for it is analogy.
Yeah,
Is that
it's an
what
analogy.
that would be called?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So yeah, what else do we got on boundaries today?
Well, I mean, heck, one thing I wanted to say is that boundaries and limits, in that definition said limits.
Mm.
You want to go there?
Yeah, like talking about, well, for one, setting personal limits. And where I'm seeing in my life, like, things really take off is when I accept my own personal limits and the boundaries of my life currently in this day. I used to spend a lot of time in like la la land of like, oh, I have all these dreams of doing my art and like doing all these things, but I was like avoiding my day to day go to work as a construction guy. So once I accept my own limits in my life of where I am, oh, now I show up where I'm at, and then now all the other things are transforming, and by me facing my day to day stuff, now I'm transforming into all those dreams I was having before.
It's more limitless. No.
I wouldn't say it's limitless. I mean, I still have limits today of what's possible for me to do in this day. We
Sure.
have very limited amount of time. There's limits in our day to day, and like we can dream limitlessly, and I think that's one of the dangers is it's easy to dream limitlessly, and it's easy to get stuck in that space. At least it was for me from the way, I used to be more of a consider myself, I went through like the spiritual communities and the spiritual world, and was felt really open in that way. I felt very empathic and at least thought I was feeling other people's feelings.
Sure.
I think I was telling you earlier, I've seen this funny meme, I don't know, last week or whatever, and it's got this guy, and it says, "I'm an empath," and then there's this other guy in the cartoon that says, "No, you're not. You just got PTSD." And I laughed out loud for it so good, because I feel like that's what I've experienced. As I become more healed within
Sure.
myself, and set all the proper boundaries, the less I'm feeling all of that. And I think a lot of people in spiritual communities are running around with PTSD, with all these kinds of psychic feelings and all these things, and it's like, well, how much of that is actually real?
There's some validity to some of it.
Yeah. There's some validity, and you can find synchronicities
Sure.
and those kinds of things, but at the same time, if we're grounded in ourselves and we are setting boundaries, like in a physical way with people, seems to me I'm experiencing myself like that experience of reality really fading for me.
Sure. But look at all the other things that are opening up for you too. And what I mean by you being limitless is the way that every single possibility in this moment is possible. Meaning that anything could happen in this moment.
Well, not anything.
Yeah.
Not anything.
a plane
It
could
still
crash
needs
into-
to lead from this moment.
What do you mean?
So, like, this moment, like, yeah, anything can happen of us moving or whatever, but something's not just gonna pop into here. Nothing's just gonna, like, an orb show. Not anything can happen. I feel like there are many possibilities that can happen from our current now moment in reality, but that's not anything. That's not infinite. There's like branches. So here's our now moment, and then there's all these little branches of different possibilities, but I don't see that as limitless possibility.
Why not? Because I see it as anything in that moment could happen. You know what I mean? Like there are no. So for just this to be possible, every other possibility has to exist in that same moment.
Yeah.
So I mean, or it could pop out of thin air, or magic. If you don't believe in magic, you'll never see magic.
Yeah.
So what is, you know what I mean? So yeah. I kind of feel like, like a meteorite could hit us, or anything at this moment could happen. Anything is possible. So that's what I mean by being human. Is almost, it's like being limitless. I think we limit ourselves by not allowing ourselves to express that, to being open to the magic.
I don't know. I disagree. I think there is magic, and I think there is a certain level of ability to maneuver and like experience our greatest life. But I don't believe that anything is possible. I believe like we have our current understanding of reality. We have all these current things affecting this now moment that actually put a container, a boundary on what is possible in this moment.
Self-constructed though.
I mean, yes, but we construct that so we can have this experience. If anything was truly possible, there would be all these different ways to. What am I trying to say? If anything was truly possible in this moment would be pure limitless, and we wouldn't be able to make sense of it. You know what I'm saying?
True. And maybe that goes back to the grounding point. Being grounded in not floaty and not in a fifth dimension, so to speak, if you've heard those terms before. Being in a 3D reality is being grounded, but it's really part of my programming. So I like to entertain that. I know we're a little bit off subject, but it pertains.
Mm-hmm.
My programming as a child, I came into this world as a male. I was given a name. I was given a nationality. I was given a religion. I made none of those choices in this reality, and all my history that I've learned has been given to me or shown to me. And this is what you should do. This is where you should. This is the God that you need to pray to. So
Mm-hmm.
This container has been built around my life to give me the illusion that this is that reality. But in reality, I'm a limitless being, right?
Well, at your core,
right?
But that limitless being that you are decided to come here and experience limits.
That's a possibility.
Because as a limitless being, you're limitless, and so everything is possible. And so, like, then you get really curious. Well, what is it like to experience not that? Like, what is it like to experience a life full of like boundaries and limits?
That's a good point.
And I think that's like the real core of what we're doing here as humans.
So you're saying yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, just from different perspectives. But where we're at, like, for us to have this experience, we have to have that duality. We have to have a good and a bad. We have to have something that's hot and cold, or fire and water. The differences, so that we can experience these feelings or these emotions, and so there are boundaries in that regard, to where I feel, taste, touch, and smell, and all those things. But without that, we wouldn't have these experiences we're having.
Mm-hmm.
But what if the sweet spot's in the middle there somewhere? Where the programming itself, our boundaries we've created, or our society has created upon us. What if we just, because it's a constant unprogramming of that, right? It's like a constant like letting go of what we thought we knew, and moving into this new world of like possibilities that we never realized were even. I mean, we're stepping into it now by creating these videos for the world, and hopefully helping men and women.
Not just these videos, like my art stuff is taking off. Like there's all kinds of stuff taking off.
Right.
But I feel like I didn't. I didn't like create that by. It seems to me like I really created when this stuff started taking off for me is when I accepted my limits. It's when I accepted the boundaries of my life, the challenges of my life, and this is where I'm at today. I'm gonna go do what I got to do today. It might not be art. It might not be a podcast. I might be going painting some guy's house so I can pay my bills.
Sure.
And I think there's something really humbling in that of accepting it. Actually, I had some time with a woman friend earlier today, and she works at Starbucks, and she even mentioned just like, oh, it's so humbling, to just go work at Starbucks. And it's like, yeah, that's not where I'm going to work, but this is where I got to work right now.
Right.
Like,
I think you're making.
And I think if we find the humility in ourselves, like quit thinking. Almost the dreamer is connected a lot to the ego to me. It's like, oh, I want to be this famous artist. I want to be this and I want to be that. But then I'm here and it's like so far away from that. But if we accept here fully and just fully face that day with humility, yeah, it's not the big thing. I think that will lead us to the bigger dreams we have and also to dreams we don't even know about.
It's true. That's a good point.
It's like releasing control. It's releasing control of, I think my life needs to look like this. And instead accepting this is my life today. I can still dream of the things I want.
Yeah, not thinking of step 50.
Yeah.
When you're on step 3.
Yep.
Yeah, taking each step as it's in front of you.
Yep.
Back to presence. You're being present in your job. That's giving you stability. And then it's opening up a new avenue. So step 4 is going to show itself. Like it's almost stepping into the void, and the step just appears at that perfect time, and then you can move on to
Yep. Then the little opportunities come into my life that I would have never thought of.
Right.
Like this cool opportunity last week of doing architectural drawings and getting paid good money just working from home.
Yeah.
So like, well, I didn't see that one coming. But like as soon as I like start on that path, I'm like, wow, this is exciting. This like gets me off of having to go to jobs, and I can be here at home and do the studio stuff and not expend so much energy.
Sure.
Like, wow, that's great. That's a nice next step.
What do you think about straddling the two worlds? Like you have a step in that groundedness, but you also have a step in the dreamer world to where, you're only taking one step at a time, but you don't want to let go of that dreamer world because that gives you hope, that gives you inspiration. Not that you are in step 50, but it just gives you that push.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good to straddle both. But you have to straddle both. Can't be stuck in one.
Right.
And for me, like, the dreamer aspect of it actually comes through while I'm grounded. So I'll be doing my task for the day and I'm like dreaming up of the next video or the next.
You're carrying water and you're chopping wood and then you get your inspiration.
During that.
Yes.
I used to be such a I used to spend hours a day meditating.
Yeah. Never
getting anywhere. like and I'm in my head like, why isn't it working?
This is supposed to work.
For years I did that. It's just like, oh my god, this doesn't work. And I've personally found what works best for me to meditate is to like move my body, do something simple, paint, do whatever.
Yeah.
Go to work. and then through that, it's just like, oh, now the epiphanies come. Now I can dream.
True, and that's a good point. And I use meditation, when I do meditation, is just to ground myself back. Like I bring myself back. I touch that infinite a bit, and it just gives me a reminder. Okay,
yeah.
Be here now.
Yep.
Be here. That's what Eckhart Tolle.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a book, I believe.
Yeah, Be Here Now. I've read it. So.
Yeah, I think I've read it too.
Yeah. He has a couple others too, so there's a few out there.
Yeah.
But I'll reference him too. Now that I got him up.
We'll put a little thing in there about him.
So, yeah, we will. And one more thing I wanted to point, and I have no idea how we're doing on time, but I think, why are people so attracted to the BDSM community? Talking about limits, talking about boundaries.
Okay.
So there's a draw there, right? And I've dabbled in that world, I mean, the book, what is it, 50 Shades of Grey? I mean, that went nuts, crazy, because people are attracted to some lack of control. If you have a job that you're always in control and you're the boss, and then not having that control is something that people crave, or vice versa, or various different things.
Mm-hmm.
And what I understood in my short time in that community, it's a great community. There's a lot of good, loving people in there that are trying to heal, that are working on healing things, that are exposing themselves to their own boundaries, and maybe they're pushing through these triggers. There's people that are pushing through their own physical boundaries. Maybe they had some different things with rape and things like that they're pushing those boundaries to where they can find a good, healthy attachment to that type of environment.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I've heard people discuss this about BDSM.
Yeah.
I personally haven't ever had any interest in exploring
Yeah.
that realm, or so I don't really know very much about it. I've heard people that are into it talk about it in that way.
So I'll give you a little bit of an illustration. So I was doing a little training to be a dom and a sub, and so the dom situation where the person's in control is always that has the permission. They talk about it prior to anything that happens. They set their boundaries in place. There's certain words like they'll use, like, yellow is I'm getting close to my limit. Red means stop and it's done. So there's safety buttons involved, so to speak. But really the whole experience that I was learning was a connection to the person, an energetic connection that you feel, and you're responding to their energy, like as if it's an impact play type of thing. They're using the flogger. Well, they're not going to do it any harder than that person's limit can expose it. But one of the biggest things is after that, it was the physical touch. Like after the smack with that, after the hit with that, it was a physical touch of like, hey, I'm right here, I've got you. And it allowed that person to go into that subspace. And when you get into that subspace, it was this healing energy that was created. And it was a beautiful thing. And one of the most important things, or if not the most important thing, was the aftercare. So after that scene happened, they call them scenes, they would spend time, the dom and the sub would spend time just maybe cuddling or talking or just holding, to give that person time to come out of that space. Because it's a deep healing journey for these people that want to experience it. It was for me too when I had those experiences. But it was pushing the boundaries or kind of understanding your own limitations. And so maybe we'll do a whole spiel on that, another episode on just the BDSM world.
It sounds like they're using the analogy of like the pot over the fire. They're setting these boundaries ahead of time.
Sure.
And then they go through the experience, add the fire, and it can be a transformative healing experience for them.
And not a drop comes out of the pot.
Mm-hmm.
Because they talk about it prior.
Yeah.
So there's no spillage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of beautiful. It really
interesting.
Is beautiful. So it can go dark. There's some dark places where people go with it. But I think as a whole, it's a really positive experience for many people.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, let's jump into the feminine perspective. You feel like that's ready?
I feel like it.
Right.
I feel like we've been going for some time talking about boundaries, all different kinds of places.
Limits, boundaries, all kinds of things.
Yeah, I didn't see our conversation. We hit some good stuff.
I like it. We had a disagreement. We talking about the limitless part. It felt good. So, and that's usually our conversations anyway. We don't always agree.
No, we don't.
But we always work through it, like figuring things out.
That's what makes a good conversation.
Right.
If we just both agreed, there is no conversation.
That's true. There's no differences. Okay, so Kelly wrote this today about setting boundaries is probably one of the hardest things we can do. As a single mom, it is differentiating and balancing the masculine and the feminine. Having to be both mom and dad full time. As a partner, it's about setting boundaries. Let's wait. Before I get to the partner part, this being a single mom, that's being that in that masculine, being in that feminine, being both roles at the same time, even as a single dad,
Mm-hmm.
That's tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for single parents all around.
Right.
Like having to embody both.
But it's tough on the kids
aspects
too.
It's tough on everyone.
because the kids are seeing, they want the nurturing motherly feeling where they can come and cuddle, and that's all there, right? But at the same time, when the mom has to be, the disciplinarian, or has to be in more in her masculine to point it, to push a point across, it's a it's a conflicting thing, that a balancing act that a woman or a man have to do as a single parent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Setting those boundaries are pretty rough.
Yeah, being a parent at all is just such a huge teacher.
It is.
It will definitely teach you a lot about setting boundaries.
Yes.
It's actually one of the most difficult places to set boundaries because you just love your kids so much, and they are so good at just pushing them.
Keep giving and keep giving.
They'll take.
Yeah.
They'll take until you're like, no.
I did it.
Yeah.
As a kid.
We all have. Every parent has to learn how to set good boundaries with their kids, and especially like once they get to teenagers. It's like, okay.
That's very true. We get to the partner part. As a partner, it's about setting boundaries for the outside sources to not allow interference with your relationship. That can be anything from exes to parents. It's a good one. Yeah. I mean, how many relationships have been ruined because of Facebook?
I know, that's why it's wise to not even put your relationship status much on Facebook.
Just keep your business to yourself.
Yeah, just keep your business to yourself and your close friends,
Right.
Like,
but I mean, that's a catch-22, right? Because you want to celebrate things, and you want to, pictures are fun, and you do that. But, I guess it's really a personal choice. But I'm not going to tell you what I had for dinner, and it's okay if you do. It's just like, I try to stay more private with my life.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times where I do say things, or I want to experience or send a couple pictures because I'm like, wow, I really want to celebrate that and have everyone else celebrate with me too.
Yeah, my own personal boundaries with social media is like really use it for sharing like what I'm creating.
Yeah.
I don't really share much personal stuff on social media. It's more, I just share this podcast series with people, share my art out there, share any kind of like little wisdom nuggets that come through.
Sure. But the exes, like in that kind of stuff, and how they destroy relationships on Facebook, is because they come through Messenger or Instagram, or those types of platforms where they, the back doors were 20 years ago, or even 20 years ago, didn't have that.
Nope.
People have to call you on the phone, and stuff is more secretive now, and it's hard. So setting those boundaries in social media is huge too,
mm-hmm.
especially with exes. As for friendships, setting boundaries for yourself and not absorbing any of their negativity, but being able to hold space for them as they process whatever they're going through. We do that for each other.
Yeah. Well, here's a funny thing I notice about it, like in a real friendship. Like, I don't feel like I've never really had to like set boundaries with you.
With me?
Yeah. Have we ever set boundaries with each other?
I don't think so.
I mean, here's the one thing I've noticed in my journey.
I think we respect it.
Yeah. This is what I notice through my journey of like setting boundaries. I've learned to really respect boundaries. And I'm at a place now where I can feel a boundary. I can, like, for instance, a few years ago, I was out in New Mexico for sound healing training. And I was like camping away from the school. And there was a day where I left for a while, and then the woman I was camping with like stayed at the school. And I go back to the school, and man, I could just feel in the air of just like, like we're invading their privacy. Like they only want people there like during school hours. And beyond that, we need to be off at our campsite. And I could feel it.
Yeah.
Like I could feel it in the air. And I was just like, hey, I forget her name, but it's like, hey, we need to go because I could tell. And then just moments later, like the teacher comes like, hey, you guys really got to go. We only want people here during school hours. And I think just as we develop our relationship with boundaries, we start to notice those boundaries more. And then I don't push on people's boundaries. I mean, actually, no. I'm a little bit of a joker sometimes, and sometimes I do push on people's boundaries just because I find it's funny.
Yeah.
But
do you get the reaction, or why?
Huh?
Why do you do it?
I don't know. Sometimes I wouldn't say pushing on boundaries. Sometimes I just, I guess it's just feeling a little boundary there, and
Seeing how far you can go.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
but it's usually for.
I don't even like saying it like that.
Yeah.
It's usually kind of like fun, and it's nice to be pushed out of your boundaries a little bit sometimes.
Get out of your comfort zone.
Get out of your comfort zone. Maybe I want to make it more like that. I like to get people out of their comfort zone a little bit. Sometimes I like to talk about things that people aren't really comfortable with. And I'm not going to like press on it all day, but I'll go there for a second.
See if they're right.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. And that's one thing I've actually been dialing back in. So sometimes at work, I get really, I think since I didn't like working so much, I had to find ways to like make myself happier at work. And so I kind of became like a clown. And it's like kind of pushing on people's boundaries all day.
But you can get away with it with comedy. So you can push those boundaries when you're being, because comedians could say a lot of things we can't say. Well, not these days, but back in the day, they would be able to just talk about anything in a comedic way, like the ventriloquists. There's, they can say things because it's a puppet saying it. It's not them saying it.
Yep.
So it's a disassociation with it.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is pretty.
So
fun.
That's kind of what you're doing at work. You're using humor to push.
Yeah, but then I've also noticed, like in the recent months, of just like I've seen sometimes like, oh, maybe I am going a little too far sometimes, and so I've been really trying to like dial it back a little bit, and just like really be more aware of people. Like sometimes it's a joke, but then I started to notice like, oh, that wasn't a joke to them. So I need to not do that.
Yeah.
Just dial it back.
Right. Yeah. Pushing it out. Pushing it a little too far.
I don't want to push too hard.
Yeah.
So.
I've had some really great stuff here.
I know. It kind of went all over the place around the circle of boundaries.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting.
But I mean, it's part of our life, though. These boundaries are set, like you said, when we're coming into the world, like I was talking about, and then there's a bubble of boundaries that we set.
That are kind of set for us.
Set for us, yeah. And then finding our own personal worth within our boundaries. It's like a different aspect of it.
It's like finding your own values. Like part of what I've seen in my life is just like, yeah, we are born in this certain set of things, but like we all have an opportunity to grow outside of that.
Sure.
It's like we can find what we actually personally value instead of what we were taught to value.
Right. And our personal bubbles here in the States are different from another country.
Oh, it's so much different.
Yeah, they have a different bubble that they created, a different container, so to speak. And that's why I like traveling too, because you get to experience those things that are outside your comfort zone that you had no idea unless you read it in a book or watched some YouTube videos.
Or experienced it, or,
But experiencing is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Like going to a foreign country and having some of their local food. Wow. That's the palate's all going crazy inside, So I think maybe the pushing the boundaries is a really good idea of our personal journeys, setting boundaries to where people can't hurt us necessarily, that we have that self-respect and honoring who we are.
Yeah.
But so I guess maybe it's more elastic. Maybe our boundaries are more elastic. They're moving, they're adjusting.
Yeah, they're constantly shifting and adjusting, and it's a constant process of discovery of what the boundaries are. And what's funny is what might be a boundary with one person in a certain instance might not be a boundary with another person.
That's true. I like that. I think we need to circle back on this topic.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of the topics we're going to do,
they seem
going to be happen.
Yeah. They seem to come together in certain things.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel myself getting tired.
Yeah.
I think it's a good place to end.
Yeah, let's stop.
We will stop. I'll stop. Just kidding. No, before we stop, though, we do want to take a minute to say thank you to you, the person that's still watching this video and is interested in what we have to say. Like, oh my God, we love you.
We do. And it's give us some feedback too and what you think and, where you would like to see some of these conversations go. That's really important. We were just talking about a target audience and who are our target audience.
Yep. And whoever's watching this video right now at the end, you're the kind of people we want to connect with. Yep. You're the kind of people that want to go deep and are interested in what we have to say. And so we would love it if you'd like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. It helps us connect with you better. And
Facebook group?
The Facebook group too. Yep, we got the Facebook group.
Had a pretty interesting poll that came up from last week's episode that you posted.
Yeah, that was a fun poll.
That's a pretty decent interaction with that. No one said no.
No, not a single one?
Not a single
I thought there might have been a couple.
Oh, was there? Oh, maybe it's updated.
I think there was a couple.
Okay.
Maybe. I don't know.
Talking about platonic relationships.
Yeah, platonic relationships.
Yeah. Is it possible to have a platonic
It was a pretty overwhelming yes.
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
So thank you again, and we will see you on the flip side.
Yep, next week.
Peace.